You're listening to Restaurants Reinvented, a podcast for restaurant brands who want to put growth back on the menu. In each episode, Jen Kern, the CMO of Q, highlights innovators and change agents in the restaurant industry and uncovers how leading brands are modernizing their operations to drive efficiency and meet the evolving demands of guests. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Restaurants Reinvented. This is Jen Kern, and today I'm here with Newton Hoang. He is the head of marketing and technology at Leaves Café, otherwise known as the Asian Starbucks, which I've had the pleasure of drinking at, and it's amazing. Hello, Newton. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you about this culture of care that you've mentioned to me in the past, and I know you have some fabulous employee retention stats, and I believe this series, this what started as a labor series, I've mentioned this before, quickly turned into a culture series and a leadership series, and what was originally called the Great Resignation is now being called the Great Reshuffle. The great reshuffling. And so this has really presented some challenges for restaurants. And so I'm really excited to have a brand back on, because the last couple of folks I've had on have been more, influencers, consultants, if you will. And you're living it day in and day out. So I'm excited to dig in. But why don't you go ahead and give our listeners some background on you and your experience in the restaurant industry, and then we'll go from there.
No, absolutely. I've been in the marketing space for about 20 plus years, and have been in the technology space for about a decade. And, prior, if I rewind time back to my earliest days, pursuing an undergraduate in the field of biology, I broke my mom's heart and decided to do something totally different after I graduated, and somehow landed in the food and beverage space. Much like everybody else out there, I was working to make rent, pay for books, et cetera, et cetera. And I come to find the genuineness and authenticity in the hospitality industry, and just met a lot of really great folks, and it just felt really natural to me. Mm-hmm. So I took a leap, entered into the franchisee space, and partnered in with some cohorts to open up a Robex Juice here in Southern California. Did that for the better half of 10 years. And that's kind of where I started to get very immersed in the multifaceted life between being a marketing guy and an ops guy and an HR guy and a finance guy. And the one part of all of that resonated most with me was the marketing component. So I essentially, put myself out there into the consultancy space, and one thing led to another, got a client. He then told me I'm a little bit too expensive for a retainer and brought me on full time. And, the genesis of those opportunities landed me roles with some legacy brands like Carl's Jr. I've worked with some really big restaurant groups, and our portfolio size had Wingstop, KFC, Arby's, Pyology. And fast forward to today, I have the pleasure of sitting here as the director of marketing and IT for Leaves Café.
Oh, fantastic. So is it fair to say you are a self-made marketer?
100% yes.
Yeah. Okay. The best kind in my book, actually, because I came into marketing back in the days when they didn't teach marketing, right? They didn't teach marketing in college. You couldn't get a degree like you can now, and even digital marketing. And our industry has gotten so advanced and focused, which is awesome, by the way. Love that. But it's also something different when you learn on the job and you're self-taught, and you have that grit, in your background of, like you said, starting in biology, you definitely are merging that left and right brain stuff to do amazing things at Leaves, which is, for our listeners in SoCal, so mostly in California right now, correct? And a little over 30 locations?
Yeah, we occupy predominantly California. We also are in Texas and Nevada, branching out onto the East Coast later on this year.
Please, that would be awesome. But let's dive in and talk about this, what's being termed as this labor challenge that restaurants are really facing today. It really keeps coming up as the number one thing that restaurants are struggling to get beyond, just, not having people to work. And then, you layer on top of that supply chain and tightening revenues and the reckoning that we're seeing now, I believe, maybe we call it the great re-reckoning, is that people want to have fulfilling lives at work. Shame on them. How dare those people? They want to feel valued. And this whole notion of command and control that has dominated restaurants and even some of the media outlets, like Lauren Fernandez talked about this last week a lot, the Anthony Bourdain versus the Gordon Ramsay. I mean, Gordon Ramsay got popular in some circles because he screamed and yelled in the back of the restaurant.
Mhm.
And that whole culture of what Lauren called abuse in restaurants is no longer acceptable. And so people are really looking to work for cultures where they feel valued, where they can contribute, where they feel, taken care of. And so you and I were talking, and you said you have this culture of care that is a high priority at Seven Leaves. And I wanted you to talk to our listeners about that. And what does that mean to have a culture of care? And how do you, as the marketing and the IT leader, and clearly an important executive in the company, carry that out day in and day out?
Yeah, I think, as I was listening to your podcast with Donald Burns,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I kind of continuously play back in my mind is culture flows down, not up.
Mm-hmm.
And inevitably here at Seven Leaves, culture of care for large and wide is an idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, without action, a lot of things become meaningless. And, part of my entrance into the company, shy of about 1 year, I recognized that this organization has a fundamental belief in acting on this particular principle.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens in a lot of very unique and nuanced ways. And we're talking about, what's, for lack of a better word, plaguing our industry currently with regards to the great resignation or reshuffling or whatever you want to call it, is, there's a workforce out there that has a certain set of demands and requirements. And the one thing that I focused in on immediately once I came to Seven Leaves was that there was a thirst for knowledge and continued learning and education. And not education by the traditional standards of academia, but just folks who are teach me more type of mentality. And
Mm-hmm.
when I interfaced with you, Jen, about a week and a half ago at my store, and we were kind of talking about, like, are you guys feeling the labor issue? I sheepishly said no. I think we're a bit of an outlier regarding talent, and we will always be constantly recruiting, but I do see a lot of the other brands in our industry suffering quite a bit. There's banners everywhere touting high wages and whatnot, and I get it. I understand that. But here at Seven Leaves, one of the things that I really was trying to focus in on is just understanding what our current team members want that has some level of reasonableness. And a lot of them were just saying that they really wanted to understand the business quite a bit more. They wanted to be, like you said, acknowledged and valued. And so I surmised, and we came up with a kind of an action list of things that we did that, for lack of a better word, continues to add value to our team member experience. One of those things that we've done is, I have the privilege of sitting on a board of directors here at Seven Leaves who are way more smarter than I am in their respective fields. And so we kind of engineered a calendar in by which we allowed the team members to connect with each of us at various parts of the year. So we had our finance guy on last month, and anyone and everyone within our organization could jump on and just pick his brain about restaurant finance, right? And understanding the ins and outs of a P&L, and understanding, metrics in that space. We have a real estate guy, and that was very well attended. And we had, aspiring team members saying, like, hey, I really want to get into real estate. How did you get in there? So on and so forth. So, in terms of some of our retention strategies, coming up with these quote unquote sessions or opportunities for our team members to interface with us is all about our culture of care. And ultimately, it's resonated very well with them, in by which they're looking forward to the next thing that they can learn from us.
Yeah.
And, I've seen the fruits of that. We've kind of farmed out a couple of hidden gems in our organizations, right, through that curiosity. And my workforce here at Seven Leaves at our store level is very galvanized. I cannot say it enough that everybody down at my stores is way better off than I was when I was their age. And it marvels me to know that they know what they know, but yet they are always seeking to learn more. And so, as part of that culture of care, to kind of put a nice little bow on this statement, it was just really about listening to our team members and giving them something that maybe wasn't compensatory, like, right, it's not an actual raise or money, but there are other things that they want.
Right.
And so that's essentially, kind of been an initiative for us, and it's worked out really well. And we're doing a lot of other kind of smaller ancillary things. We just had a scholarship program, the first of its kind for our organization, where we awarded it to one team member at all of our stores.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's just kind of like those little things. We're a small but mighty brand, and we can't go toe to toe with some of the other brands that are giving full tuition reimbursements, et cetera, et cetera. But we can get creative, and that's what we've done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love it. I mean, you're talking about your team members being galvanized, and that's a term I haven't heard before. They're fully on board is what I'm hearing. And the other thing that was so interesting in listening to you just now is we're really talking about training the next generation of workers, like loving on these people and training them. And you talked about that thirst for knowledge that they have, because what is it? 75% are between the ages of 16 and 24. Is that kind of the stat? Yeah.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah. That take up our industry. And so these are young people that are curious. And yes, it's incredible to me. Like this generation, financial and compensatory, like you said, is not the number one thing. It's being cared about, and it's being like what I hear you talking about is training them on all things about the business and helping them understand the business so they can see all those different lenses. I love this idea of like, hey, you get exposure to finance. Hey, you get exposure to real estate. Hey, you get exposure to, I'm sure, Newton, marketing and IT. Hey, you get exposure to ops. And this is the way you run an organization. This is what it looks like. And me as a youngster, like, I feel like, gosh, if I was like exposed to all that stuff at that young age, which I had to work really hard to get out there and like look for things. Like I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, ha ha ha, but I went and I did an internship at a law firm, and I was like, nope. But I spent like literally like 4 months like miserable because I was like, oh, I think I want to be a lawyer, but putting all that stuff in front of this generation of, kids, I'll call them for the most part, that is so valuable. Like to me, that's really nurturing. That's really nurturing their intellect, their curiosity, and opening up their eyes to like, hear all the potential things you can do. And hey, I'm on this. I'd love to hear how you do it. If it's a webinar or a phone call or a town hall, I'm on this. I'm listening to the finance guy. I don't have any idea what he's talking about. I don't really care. Let me check that off my list. I don't want to go into finance. That's not getting me excited. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, we've kind of wrapped our hands fully around it. Right now, it's virtual for obvious reasons, but the engagement that we see when the team members are talking to us is really just cool, right?
Yeah.
There's a bit of an honesty and sincerity, and generally for folks who know me, I do have a tendency to drop an F-bomb here and there, and that's not on purpose. But as I come more and more interactive with the folks from our stores, they really are wanting the straight talk, right? They really are like, just tell me kind of how it is, and just give me the down and dirty, right?
Yeah.
Don't give me things that I want to hear. Tell me things that you experience, and I can see if I can relate. And fortunately, as an interesting segue, my speaking engagements have been kind of proliferating throughout our local area. And I recall a speaking session that I did at Cal State Fullerton for the American Marketing Association. And that part of me was just something that I just casually do. And then it became no more apparent to me that there is a certain sort of niche here that is completely devoid, And what I'm talking about is, obviously kind of guiding future marketers or future students or whomever and giving them a sneak peek into our industry, because let's be frank, our industry has gotten a bad rap for decades, right? Slave labor, just 15-hour, 16-hour workdays. And that's part of our company history and our industry history, so to speak, but it doesn't have to be the way it is in the future. And so, I shed light on a lot of things that are sort of aha moments for the audiences that I talk to. And then I was like, if I continue to talk to some folks, maybe, and to Donald Burns's point in, your restaurant sucks, do it one person at a time.
Yeah.
And so I've been corralling a lot of my fellow cohorts in our organization and say like, hey, why don't you go and do a speaking engagement at the local high school? Right? Why don't you go and do a quick mock interview session for the United Way, which we partner with all the time? And that has really been a tremendous tsunami of, oh, hell yeah, let's do that. Because, a lot of times organizations have a difficult time isolating or figuring out like, how do you give back, or how do you change the trajectory of our industry? And impactfully, I'm a big local store marketing guy. And so this has actually been a pseudo tactic that we've had, is that we present our organizational leaders right down to store managers and give them opportunities to connect with their community. And we have seen the dividends and the benefit of that tenfold by way of increased engagement in our stores. Like, oh, hey, I saw you at my son and daughter's, classroom, and, we thought we stopped by because they kept talking about it. And I really appreciate you talking about, your experiences in HR or whoever or whatever. And I don't think I've had the opportunity to be part of any brand that does that. And so here we kind of creatively embrace the new version of marketing, which is human marketing, and in an elevated form. And, I think, why that perhaps resonates with the likes of you and me is that it is not like a digital thing. It's not like an FSI. It's not any of that. It's just like, let's just talk.
Yeah.
And get to know each other. And so at its purest level, it embodies a lot of the things that we do here for Seven Leaves. But for me, it aligns with my moral compass of like, yeah, hopefully I can help someone not make the dumb mistakes that I did growing up.
Yeah. Well, we all make mistakes. They're kind of part of life. But, I love that, you're talking about this human marketing, and I love that you're out there and the speaking. I mean, what you're talking about to me, I'm thinking like guerrilla marketing, grassroots marketing, like one person at a time. And, so many thoughts were going through my head as you were talking about that, because it's, it's that whole employee value proposition. Like, what does that mean to a company? What does that look like when we talk about that? Your employees are your brand ambassador, right? Your employees are the ones through some of the things you're talking about that attract your guests, right? And they're the best reflection of how well is your business doing. When I walk in, we talked about this a lot on the Donald Burns with most of the fast casual and QSR places I walk into, they look miserable. You just look at their face and they look miserable. In fact, I have a new story to tell, because I went to one of my fan favorite salad bowl kit places around here. I'm not going to say the name of it, but I love all the people that work there. They kind of know me now, and I know the manager, and he's a total doll. But I was behind someone in line who was waiting for the dressing to be put on their bowl. Or no, I'm sorry, it was the cheese. And they were out of the cheese. And so the person working the make line ran back to get the cheese in the back. And this guy, he was a guest. He just started having a fit. Like, he waited probably 3 minutes max. I'm being generous. And I mean, just was saying the most awful stuff to these kids, right? You see them. There wasn't a single person working there that was over the age of 28. I'm just going to go out on a limb there, right? And there were 4 or 5 people there. And after the gentleman, first I said to him, like, hey, be nice. It's free, and he just sort of, grumbled at me too. And after he left, I said to who happened to be the manager working putting the bowl together, I said, how often does that happen to you, that you get guests like that? And he said 20. I said, give me a percentage. He said 25% of the time. So 1 out of every 4 person is, yeah, and if you want to talk about the community of care, I mean, in a culture of care, it's like, come on, like this is two-way. This is like what you're talking about. This is one person to one person. And these kids have to quote unquote put up with that and that type of job, and it's like, it's what you're talking about. And that's part of, like, you want to talk about the great resignation. That's one of the main reasons, I'm sure, they're not coming back, and that stinks. And so we as managers, leaders in our companies need to give them tools and equip them with tools. And sometimes it's just verbal, like I said, hey, be nice, it's free. Like, took me years to learn to say something like that to someone, I was all mess, like, make everyone, like me type of person. Right. So it's like, how do we equip these kids to deal with that's a very confrontational, challenging situation to negotiate your way through at any age, right? And you're talking about getting people out there and giving, store managers speaking opportunities, which gives them the opportunity to navigate through life's difficult water sometimes, right? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I went off on a tangent there.
No, Jen. I
Yeah.
think what you kind of hit home in on is, at the core foundational level, it's an interaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by way of presenting first yourself authentically, and then secondly the brand, a lot of our team members don't know how to differentiate one from the other. And my best advice is don't. You are the brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't think that your persona is something you have to put up a front for the customer,
Right.
and you have to say a certain script and
Right.
whatnot. Most of the time, what we institutionalize here at Seven Leaves is really empowerment and saying that you have the opportunity to make that situation right. Do what you think is right first and
Mm-hmm.
foremost. And 9 times out of 10, I'm pleasantly surprised. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you get a mulligan and where you're like, you know what, I probably wouldn't have done it that way, it's okay. It's not
Yeah.
final, right?
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
you will get to live another day and deal with another customer. So don't sweat the small stuff. And a lot of times, a lot of our team members feel like they're in this like vacuum where they have to constantly, churn and hit a certain benchmark, and that's all part of it too. But at the end of the day, is like, that's either someone's daughter or someone's son, that's someone's spouse, that's
Yeah.
someone's significant other, whomever it is. We look at it from that perspective as well. And so
Yeah.
it's important for us that, even as we kind of propagate and say like, hey, if you ever want to go out in the community and talk, we won't let them go out there willy-nilly. We give them some coaching and just say like, so, when you talk, what are you going to talk about? Here, let me hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, maybe you can bring a couple of samples, and then, then they kind of make it their own. And I said like, what makes this fun for you? Like, what do you
Mm-hmm.
want to tell them? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. Tell them that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Run with it,
Yeah.
because it becomes much more authentic and it
Yeah.
becomes a lot more sincere, which is the number one demand for every single customer nowadays, is sincerity, authenticity, integrity, transparency, blah, 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 blah. And so
Yeah.
people are really good at calling BS. And,
Mm-hmm.
my young workforce, as well as my young customer base, are very good at that. And
Yeah.
so it's important that, I recognize that and grab the bull by the horns and just play nice with that bull.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember, I mean, it stuck with me when I had the opportunity to come to your store and we were having that delicious tea. Oh, I love it. You said that's who I care about. You pointed to the young woman that was helping a customer, behind the counter. And then you said, I care about her and her, like the one that just walked in
Mhm.
and the one helping the one that just walked in. Right. And it just stuck with me, like those, like that. And now you're talking about that one-on-one interaction, human to human interaction, the one person at a time. And yet we live in the great age of digital, right? And so, I know you have your teas on all the deliveries, and how do you make that jump from, okay, inside the four walls, I can manage it this way. Inside the four out perimeters of your screen, we manage it this way.
There's a bit of a multifaceted approach that
Mm-hmm.
I've always leaned on in all of my past experiences. I've again had the pleasure of working with a lot of very, very good marketing professionals. I've sat in on a ton of agency pitches, and needless to say, there's always an intention behind every sort of activity. And so for me, it's a less is more type of thing. That's just to preserve my own sanity, to be brutally honest. I think
Mm-hmm.
I can do a lot of things for Seven Leaves, but I choose not to.
Right.
And really, where the biggest value proposition is for within my four walls environments is understanding what my customer believes is of value to them. And so if it's an imagery strategically placed, I want them to not only to skim it, but I also want them to engage with it. If it's on the digital space, is it I not only want them to see it in terms of the eyeballs are there, but I want them to also interact with it. And so there are more tools than I can ever imagine relative to
Mm-hmm.
things that we can do. But
Mm-hmm.
I think you've heard me say that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And
Right.
so it's all about fit. And, I came from the world of FSIs and looking at TRPs and flow charts and, billboards and bus shelters and the whole. Seven Leaves me ain't about that. It's not where my customers' eyeballs are at. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just had to kind of recalibrate and understand, like, okay, well, where are my customers at? And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay, they're in social. Big whoop-de-doo. And that was not a aha moment. But how do I get myself above the fray? And how do
Mm-hmm.
I create an experience that is genuinely Seven Leaves? And so a lot of times, and this is actually part of a peek under the hood at our reframe marketing strategy, is creating stories that not talk about the products, because we could always take a nice fanciful product shot, but it's about the people of our organization. And I think I recall I told you when we were in meeting with each other, there's this drink cook that we have, and he's been with us since day one. He's put four of his kids through college. Um,
Wow.
and he's an immigrant, and he has very limited speaking skills, but thank you is universal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just acknowledgement and just saying, like, man, you're awesome, and how are your kids? And you know, to the layman, that might seem like a very sugar coated experience, but at some point there's a connective tissue there because they're like, oh, that kind of reminds me of my uncle or my dad. And
Mm-hmm.
our customer base acknowledges that. So,
Mm-hmm.
we have all these little gems throughout our organization, and just really wanting to shine light on not necessarily a person by making them a moniker, but just we're normal people like
Mm-hmm.
everybody else, we
Right.
grind like everybody else.
Right.
And so we have a very methodical and strategic marketing calendar engineered between highlighting, a young lady who's a college student and she's going to be the first in her family to go, and she's our team member, or it's our drink cook, or it's even our R&D team that is traveling to parts unknown to kind of search for the next latest and greatest thing.
Mm-hmm.
That, in my opinion, is what I believe our customers want.
Mm-hmm.
They value that over a beautiful little picture of a drink, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so that's really how I've been able to kind
Mm-hmm.
of selectively and discriminatingly choose what areas of digital and in-store four-walled environment that I choose to exploit.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. And this idea of using your people in your marketing instead of your food is
Oh,
something
yeah.
that's come up a lot more recently. And it's like, in a way, it's like, duh, right? But not that many people are doing it. And I personally love it. And if I were living out there, I'd be one of your, personas. I want to know more about Brian, who's the guy at my salad place who, gave me his name and number because he's the store manager. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of curious about his life, and I do want to know more about him, because that extends that brand and that experience to taking it off the surface level of it being a transaction. And we all know that hospitality, I mean, none of us are in here because we want to be transactional all day long. usually. I mean, maybe a couple of the tech people,
Okay.
but like we're not in hospitality because we don't want to talk to people. We don't want to be like, we want to know about people. We want to hear their stories. And so I'm curious, like, how much of your marketing, like, I don't know, maybe I'll do the percentage thing like you did with Brian. How much of your marketing are you putting it people in versus product? Is it like a 50-50 split or?
The people component is it's a growing percentage. Right
Okay.
now, it's flirting right at around 40,
Okay.
and the product is around 60. And then
Mhm.
within those particular categories, a good lion's share of that is the local store marketing component. One of the things that I've had the privilege of doing is being a field marketer for many, many years. And
Mhm.
you talk the term of guerrilla marketing. I came from
Mhm.
the world of, doing lawn bombs, putting a coupon in a cup and just chucking that in someone's lawn, just hoping to get a redemption. And,
Yeah.
sometimes it's really not sexy, but it got the job done.
Yeah.
And so, in the local store marketing component, really where our mentality here is to own every single block around all of our stores.
Mm.
And a lot of our efforts are geared towards local store marketing. So we have national campaign initiatives, we have a subsection of people driven initiatives, and then the other big animal is the local store marketing component. I've got a young lady who we farmed out of our store who's like surgically used for local store marketing activations. And, her legacy in our stores is a big win for us, but her then now also being an additional face of our brand and finding opportunities to engage with our communities is really something that our brand hasn't done consistently in the past, from what I understand.
Mhm.
So I think that's really where a lot of brands kind of live and die on the sword,
Mhm.
and a brand that does it extremely well for obvious reasons is Chick-fil-A. They have a very galvanized, engaged group of folks that are
Yeah.
all about touching their communities that they serve. And
Yeah.
so, we, for lack of a better word, emulate that in a lot of
Mhm.
regards. But, at the same token, we're very strategic about how we engage with the community, because
Yeah.
we get a lot of people who want to be part of the Seven Leaves experience. We just want to make sure it's authentic and sincere at the same time.
Right. And by the way, I actually think we should go back to throwing cups with coupons on the lawn. You know, I feel like we've kind of lost the touch, the high touch of that, the guerrilla grassroots marketing stuff. And again, I only know myself as a guest. I like that. I want that. I want a little bit more touch. Like, I'm good with digital. I'm on my screen all day. I'm on Zoom all day. I'm on the
Correct.
phone all day. Like, give me some touch. Give me some touch. Let me see it, feel it, touch it. Let me see another side of you other than on the screen.
Yeah, no, we live in the world of
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
so, we do make strategic activations utilizing FSIs, particularly when we enter into a new trade area,
Mhm.
so that customers can get a nice quality, piece in front of them, postcard, and really get a good impression of our brand. And at the same token, we'll layer in the local store component, we'll kind of double down on the digital, and then we really start to try to find the gems within that community, or things to
Mhm.
unlock all the sales potential in that respective area.
Yeah. Now you've said FSIs a lot. I haven't asked yet, but what does it stand for?
A freestanding insert.
Freestanding
So
insert. Okay.
I think for many of our listeners here, whether they recognize it or not, there's organizations like Velasas that kind of facilitate those mailers that go to a lot of the
Mhm.
residences in and around stores. And so
Mhm.
that was, for lack of a better word, when I was with Carl's Jr., a big chunk of the marketing budget was on those FSI mailers. And it's a
Mhm.
strategy that has worked for that brand through and through. Here,
Mhm.
we're a little bit more discriminating about when we utilize those type of things, but
Mhm.
marketing is marketing, and
Yeah.
I'm all about just ensuring that whatever we do comes across the right way.
Right. Right. I love that. And I have been thinking, I'm glad you brought up Arby's and CKE and Carl's Jr. because I have been thinking as you've been talking, like, I bet there's people thinking as they're listening, Well, he's a smaller cafe. It's in one geographic location. Sure, these really innovative like local community involvement tactics can work for him. But for me to roll that out for my national brand that has, locations in every state while engaging my employee base the way you're talking about engaging your employee base, having them out in the community, speaking. Is there really a difference though? I mean, what have you seen on a larger brand size versus a smaller brand size?
I prior to coming here to Seven Leaves, I worked for a restaurant group and we had about 250 plus units. And I was the marketing guy for our company and I was flanked by two coordinators. And that was it. And when you occupy the franchisee space, it's all about execution of what the franchisor wants and national campaigns. It became no more apparent to me that even though we are a nationally recognized brand with a ton of brand equity associated, the gap is that you take for granted that you think customers know who you are, and
Mm-hmm.
depending on who your audience size is or who your demographics are really how you should be very tactical about who you're talking to. So when I was with Carl's Jr., we did a lot of community fairs and we brought Happy Star out. We bought the mobile food truck out and it was a big party. But it struck me that some folks are like, I've never had a Carl's Jr. I'm like, say what? This brand is like 75, 80 years old. How have you not?
I haven't.
But yeah, and so, that is just something you just take for granted that,
Mm-hmm.
despite how long a brand is or how big they are, you can always be a first time experience for
Mm-hmm.
anyone and anyone. And so old or young, it's all the same. And so
Yeah.
it's essentially just trying to ensure that your brand is well represented, your product is awesome, and hopefully it creates a moment of truth where they're like, this is awesome. I want to try this again. And so
Yeah.
it can be done. It's just, for lack of a better word, slightly unappealing when you think about it because you're like, we're so big. How do we get down? Brands choose the trajectory that they want, and if so, that if they don't wish to get at that granular level, then okay, you're
Yeah.
just not going to be there. You're going to
Right.
be at a different elevation.
Yeah.
Um, I think for us, we will always have the local component. And I, again, give kudos to Chick-fil-A, huge brand, but they do it. So
Yeah.
it can be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that's always been resonating with me when we talk is you've mentioned this a few times. I mean, we live in this world of right?
Yes.
And so I want to shift just a little bit and talk about, not necessarily the marketing lens of it, because your and is your marketing and IT, which, unicorn-ish, but more the trend, obviously. But the and that exists in our space around what does this modern restaurant leader look like? What do modern restaurants, period, look like? Forget like put the leadership side even aside, but you really to me are embodying that. And I'd love for your take on that. Like, what is your perspective about what the modern restaurant landscape looks like, and having more of these ands? Like, what do we need to be doing more of to care about the employee and the guest, marketing and IT, right? The community and the marketing, right? Like, what do we need to be doing more of to help, as the show has been named, keep reinventing restaurants for the better?
The easiest answer to that in a reflection of, the new generation of restaurants is to essentially acknowledge it. We, for lack of a better word, grew up, at least I did, going to either a sit down or a fast food.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my teens, like fast casual just kind of came out of nowhere. And then there was like quick casual. And then there was just all these other segments that, it was a nice little word to attach, but you start to kind of realize that the gap between those categories began to slowly start to blend.
Mm-hmm.
And as it relates to restaurants and how we should look at what we're doing is just know that it's okay to be fluid. that you don't want to be pigeonholed into a specific space. And like you said earlier, like customers alike, we don't want to be put into a bucket, right? You know, I'm more than just a barcode or a number. I'm this and I'm that. And so as an organizational restaurant, if you can frame your experience around looking at it from multiple perspectives without overextending yourself is really going to give you that competitive advantage. You know, we do a semi-decent job of listening to our customers relative to just the landslide of feedback that they give us. And so it's important for us to anticipate and understand that, okay, yeah, our brand doesn't feel like it's on brand for us. But guess what? My customer's telling me she wants that. She wants a locker for her to pick up her drink. And so either A, we don't do that, or B, we listen and we create a better experience related to that, because that's just the way it's going. You know, you can't go the opposite way of that current, because if you do, one, you're going to get punished quite a bit. So it's extremely important to just kind of go with the flow. It sounds stupid, but I don't allow myself to get comfortable or dead set on like, okay, this is my marketing plan. Because if there's anything the last 2 years have showed us is like that stuff's got to be pivotal. You got to just like take it, check it out, and do something different.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as I kind of look at restaurants nowadays and just the experimentation that I'm going on, one, it warms my heart, because that's why I love the hospitality industry, is because we're just willing to try a whole bunch of new things, right?
Yeah.
But at the same token, what eventually ends up settling are the experiences that the customer truly values the most, right? And so you're going to get a lot of that. You're going to get a lot of things that are being tried that just don't resonate. And then there's going to be a lot like, oh yeah, that was an amazing game changer for our industry.
Speaking of which,
yeah,
let's talk about that. Sorry to interrupt, but speaking of which, let's talk about that green tie campaign you have running now that you launched on St. Patty's Day.
You're awesome, Jen. I think, you know, we as a brand just recently launched a drink called Green Thai Tea. It was 2 years since our last new product launch, for obvious reasons again. And I just kind of flirted with the idea like, hey, let's release this drink on St. Patrick's Day, and, you know, just kind of be tongue in cheek about it. We did a soft launch prior to St. Patty's Day, and we started to kind of see a couple of things. One of the things that we saw was it instantly became our number 2 seller. And that was a little not anticipated, to be brutally honest. We were like, oh, okay, this is a thing now. And then St. Patty's Day launched with our media, and it did something that has never been done in our company, is that it took the number 1 spot. And for Seven Leaves' decade-long experience, we've had a drink called our house coffee. It's like our number 1 seller. It's like our Big Mac, our double, whatever you want to call it. And like nothing ever touched it. Far and wide product mix, we were like, 60% of my product mix is house coffee, but not on March 17th. It became the Green Thai Tea. And that was, I guess, something self-realized. Like I knew that, you know, with the right kind of marketing on an amazing product, it would do great, but I did not anticipate it taking out the number 1 spot. And so St. Patrick's Day will forever be known as Green Thai Tea Day for Seven Leaves, at least internally for us. And,
Well,
and
kudos to you.
really well.
That's huge. That's huge. When you told me that, I was pretty blown away. I mean, that's huge. And the whole campaign is it still running, by the way?
Yeah, it's still running, and you know, it's piggybacked by a lot of different sort of activations that I'm very proud of. One of the ones that we did was creating a collaboration with the Thai Authority of Tourism. We're offering a sweepstakes to send a lucky Seven Leaves customer to Thailand. And
pick me.
Yeah, no, it's super easy to enter. Just download the app and you're entered. But we'll be announcing that winner on April 14th, which is Thai New Year. And hopefully that will be, you know, just another really beloved moment where we can celebrate with a Seven Leaves customer, whoever that is, that, hey, man, you're going to Thailand. That's pretty awesome.
It's really awesome. That's really awesome. And I just think that's really a fun, you know, way to take this human marketing that you're talking about to the next level. I mean, giving someone like sweepstakes like experience like that. I
Mhm.
mean, like I'm telling you, like I'm kind of competitive. I want to participate. I want to win, you know? It reminds me a little bit of, remember the Monopoly cards at McDonald's? No,
Oh, yes.
they bring them back every once in a while, right? And it's just like fun. It's just like a thing to do, right? And it's like, yeah, enter me in that contest. Let me see what I can win. But winning a trip to Thailand, that's something special. That's really special. And you're, I'm sure, going to get a lot of mileage out of that on social. Like, who knows? Yeah, for months to come. Um, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about when it comes to this and being open and trying new things. I mean, you clearly exemplify that. Like, growing up not being in marketing and then being like, hey, I see value in learning this and trying this is my experience meeting you, which is something that I've noticed in the industry as marketers coming more into the technology purchasing decision and strategically advocating within their company what tech tools they need and why. And so, in full transparency, we've been talking about that, with my company Q. And I was thrilled to see that you were, one of the key decision makers, because you're in marketing and tech. And I think it makes a much bigger difference when you've got that marketing perspective and lens in those tech decisions. And that's something that I don't see as happening as quickly in our industry. I mean, it's starting to happen now, but I'm curious what that's been like for you, having both the marketing and tech responsibility and then navigating what has become just a sea crowded with all sorts of technology fish, right? And trying to navigate the differences and do the right thing for your brand.
When you make that example of a sea and all the fish, then I would probably be the bait because everyone is always trying to chirp at me regarding the latest and the greatest. My interactions with technology and IT have truly been an accident. Early on in my marketing career, I recognize a sort of gap that I'm trying to do this activation, but I'm getting held up by like the programming or some sort of back end API that's just not doing what it's supposed to do. And that's just maddening because I like to make data-based decisions. And so I then said, well, shoot, let me try to learn what is this thing that is holding the whole process up. And through the path of self-discovery, I aligned myself with a whole slew of technology folks which don't talk marketing and realize that I can translate this. I'm fairly good at breaking down the most complex ideas into a very simple principle. And this convergence internally for me and becoming a marketing and IT guy has really been fruitful for me and created longevity in my career around one singular word that I kind of take away from one of my career coaches, Kevin Dunn, is relevancy. And so a lot of organizations that I interact with that either like trying to court me or trying to pick at me are really trying to understand what's going on in the current day and age and state. And so when I have conversations with tech companies, particularly POS, I'm looking at it from a slant of like, okay, do you have a CRM component? What's your integration with loyalty and mobile? Then from an IT perspective, I'm like, does this need a managed firewall? Do I need to have an IP schema? And then, what kind of home runs do I need? So those technicalities on both hemispheres are generally what catch a lot of folks off guard. They're like, yeah, let me have you talk to my tech guy, or let me have you talk to my marketing guy. Because I've been around enough and again, made a ton of mistakes. But at the same token, it's really given me the ability to keep everyone honest, right?
Yeah.
Because I can see through and I'm like, yeah, you're going to promise me a lot of those nice functions and oversell a product, but coming back to what you said, fit for the brands that I'm with, I'm like, yeah, we don't need that. This is what we need. And so really distilling down is extremely necessary when you're going through technology discoveries, because again, there's always a technological solution, right? But if you don't address the core issue, the solution that tech provides isn't really going to fix the problem. And so it's supposed to support it, but definitely not fix it. So I think, POS, mobile app, loyalty, all of these things kind of have like this really reframed architecture nowadays. I understand Q is architecture based, right? At its core. And then your in-kind competitors are essentially, it's a POS transactional terminal that really isn't doing the data management thing, but it can do a handful of other things. And so as brands kind of flirt with technologies, is understanding what the brand needs and then just aligning with the right kind of strategic partner.
Right. What do you think, where do you think the technology companies are missing the mark?
Listening to clients and just listening to prospective clients, right? I understand the whole sales mentality, churn them, get them down in the funnel, to another account executive. And I can easily say that if you haven't done your homework, reaching out to my organization, that's the fastest way for me to just give you a very short, like, thanks, but no thanks. I think like technology companies need to be discriminatory a little bit relative to just trying to find the right strategic partners as well.
Yeah.
Right. I connected with your guy, Sean Brennan, and he's like, we're talking to you and measuring you up as much as you are measuring us up. And I love that. Right. Because you just don't want to give it out to everyone. And I get, business models and whatnot. But I think in technology, it's just important to ensure that whoever you partner in with is a partner at their core, right? You guys work shoulder to shoulder. You elevate both brands, not just like, hey, I'm giving you a tool and then I'm not going to deal with you anymore.
Yeah. And that's it's honestly an age-old problem that we've had in the tech space, with especially when all the VC and PE companies started coming in, and it really just turned into this hardcore numbers game, which is, for me, where I actually lost some of my interest in some ways. I was like, it's not, I'm not in marketing to be about numbers. Go read my LinkedIn about section. Like, I'm not in marketing to sell shit. Like, I want to make a movement. I want to change the world, like your phrase, in your company. I want to be the change you want to see in the world. And that's plagued tech providers for a long time. And I look at this space and I don't envy the buyers at all, because of how inundated you are. And honestly, just the nature of the industry still being around shows like conferences. And you lead, and which we do a lot of, by the way. I'm not dinging them. I love them. I think they're great, and you do get the human side of it. But you get there, the lead up to the shows is like, the brands tell me they got 50 emails a day coming from every single person that's got. Now they've stopped giving the emails out, which is good. They'll just give, like, they won't even give the name of the person attending. They'll say the company and the title. That's what we get if we sponsor, many Ks, right? We get like a little bit of a list. But since I came here, I'm like, I'm not sending those people like 5 emails in a workflow like I would have done at my last transactional SaaS company, put them in a drip campaign. No, like, they're going to get that from every single other. So we'd maybe send one, or the sales people would reach out, the ABM style, just person to person, like you're saying. And so I've kind of looked down on that, but I know it happens like all around, and we need to get better at that. So I appreciate the listening for sure. Always, right? Is a good one. So I'd like to kind of wrap up here, and thank you for your time, and talk to you. We started out talking about this culture of care. And, Donald Burns did this to me, where he sort of turned it around and he said, well, what is your self-care regimen, Jen? And I was like, oh, but I'd love to know. It was a good exercise for me to go through. And I think we need to, if we're going to talk about care, we need to start with ourselves. Right. And Lauren and Donald talked about this. Like, if we're not taking good care of ourselves, it's the whole oxygen mask, adage. Like, we can't take care of other people. So, Newton, what is your self-care regimen?
My self-care regimen is something that I've been doing for probably 20 years. And it involves 2 wheels, and it's called a mountain bike. And I've been doing that for more times than I can count. I've got a ton of miles on my legs. But if there's anything that takes me away from all the insanity that the industry provides me, is mountain biking, by way of, when I'm in the zone and I've got my earbuds in and I've got Old Blue Eyes playing, then I don't think of anything else. And that has been truly a discipline. And it's evolved quite a bit. And actually, my CEO, Sunny Nguyen, asked me a very similar question. And I told him, as of recent, in the last year or so, I used to be the kind of guy that would just grind it out, get up there as quickly as I can, and fly down the hill as quickly as I can. And I could literally do the ride in my sleep because I've done it all the time. And then I just decided to just slam on my brakes and stop in the middle of my downhill and just look around. And it never became more apparent to me of all the things that I missed. Like, I didn't notice that tree was there or that mountain lion or that rock. But, when I stopped writing and just took a moment to pause and reflect, it was like, oh, I have been totally missing a lot of things that I just took for granted. And so now it's about changing it up, going fast, going slow, looking, and just have those moments where, like, yeah, man, I'm having fun at what I'm doing in life. And, I feel very honored. My recent break is I'm a new father. And,
congratulations. Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
Yeah, no, she's a joy. I call her a joyful tornado.
Oh, how old is she?
She's 2 years old.
Okay.
Going on 13.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
She's definitely, she keeps me sharp, and I look at the world through her eyes. And I think, if there's anything that I'm trying to do recently, indirectly or directly, is to just give her a fighting chance at a world that's better. Right. And so, I don't take that for granted. And, if I can inspire somebody else to make a couple of things in our world more humane, then I think my daughter would be proud of me. So that's kind of just why I do what I do.
Oh, you really just touched me there. I got a little goosies thinking about your daughter. What is her name?
Her name is Lauren.
Lauren. Oh, and that's going to be the episode that comes out right before yours is Lauren. So you'll have to listen to Lauren Fernandez. She's fabulous. Talk about a great woman. Well, thank you for sharing that. I love hearing it. Sounds like a kind of meditation for you out in the woods, mountain biking, and using your and. So biking really fast and pausing and taking it all in.
Yeah, and I haven't done that recently.
Well, you talked about stopping or slowing down and looking at the trees and, just taking in this beautiful world we live in, right? The nature and this whole forest washing idea has become a thing, where it's like, yes, when I get out in nature and I'm walking in nature, I can forget everything. And I am very intentional when I go out in my woods and walk, to look for the bird, to look for the falling leaves, to listen for the sounds. And like you said, that's a form of release and escape and self-care. Correct. So thank you for sharing that with me. That's really cool. And as we wrap, is there any last thing you want to impart to folks listening? We always say how to reach you, but I'm sure they could find you on LinkedIn or whatnot. But closing comments about you or your brand.
No, first and foremost, Jen, I want to thank you for having me. It's been a true pleasure. And, for 7 Leaves Café, we have a lot of really amazing things coming down the pipeline. If you haven't tried the green Thai tea, I recommend that you do. And, like anything else, don't be a stranger. You can reach me via LinkedIn, carrier pigeon, whatever works. I'm always open for a conversation.
Awesome. Well, I encourage all folks to reach out to you. I mean, you really have a fresh perspective and a new way of doing things within the restaurant. And it's been a true pleasure getting to know you. I wish you were a little bit closer, because not only so I could have your amazing product, but see you. But maybe we'll see you out on the show circuit at one of the conferences. But thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and most importantly your strength and your experience with your employees and with your guests. So I hope you stay awesome. Keep reinventing restaurants and yourself.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Restaurants Reinvented. This show is brought to you by Q, a restaurant tech company paving a brighter future for operators with the industry's first unified commerce platform. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow Restaurants Reinvented in your favorite podcast app. or visit qbeyond.com/podcast to get immediate access to all of the latest episodes.